The reason you can't get a job with it is because that one thing you were trying, you didn't do it long enough. But don't spend too much time on meandering your way of what to learn. Pick what's in demand, something you enjoy, and stick with it until you get a job. Don't try it haphazardly and then, oh, I can't get a job with this, and switch to something else. The reason you can't get a job with it is because that one thing you were trying, you didn't do it long enough. Hey guys, welcome to Coding After 30. In this video, I want to talk about choosing the right thing to learn as a beginner web developer. Now, you obviously need to know HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But on top of that, you need to understand a development stack. And when you choose one, you have to stick with it and not jump around. The biggest mistake that everybody makes, or at least I made, is trying to learn everything, and you just can't. So in this video, I just want to talk about sticking to your guns, picking one stack, and continue learning that one stack until you get your first job. If you're new to this channel, my name is Paul, and I talk about switching careers into web development later in life. So if this is something that interests you, consider subscribing. Alright guys, so here's the thing. When I first started learning to code, I started with the language Ruby. Why did I start with Ruby? Well, because I had a friend who did Ruby, and he's like, this is the best thing in the world. And at the time, it was the most popular language that was hot, and everybody wanted to learn it. So I started with Ruby. After that, I just decided it wasn't for me for whatever reason, and I switched. I actually started learning PHP because I used WordPress. I really enjoyed WordPress, and I wanted to be able to make themes from scratch. And I knew that there were a lot of small businesses that would want to have WordPress powered websites, and I could help them create custom themes. And then after that, I switched to Python because I was like, you know what, Python, it's awesome. There's a lot of talk about using Python for machine learning and artificial intelligence, and I was like really excited about that. And I was like, oh, maybe I should try Python. Maybe Python is the right and the best choice. By the way, I'm really bad at math and science, so Python for data science and machine learning for me is definitely not an option, but I did spend some time learning Python. And then after that, I was like, JavaScript. Let me learn JavaScript because that is the language of the net. And by the way, if you are getting into front-end development, JavaScript is a must to learn. There's no other path outside of learning HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It's something that you have to start with. Then you might learn additional things on top of that. But without HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you cannot be a web developer or a front-end web developer. So that's very important to consider. But I started learning JavaScript. After a little bit of JavaScript jumping around, I was like, I need to learn something else, you know? So I went and I took a C++ course in college, which I really enjoyed because it was a very structured class, and it was a college class, and I felt that I learned a lot about just programming in general. But I really had no desire to use C++ outside of making games, which was at the time a very unrealistic goal for me, and so I ended up going to something else. So as you could see, jumping from one thing to another thing to another thing, I didn't really master or accomplish one specific learning goal. I knew a little about a lot, and it's not until I decided to commit to learning JavaScript and JavaScript-based technologies that I started making progress. Basically, what I'm saying is that don't jump around once you decide that this is what you want to do. You have to pick one path, and you have to see it through the end. It was not until I decided to pursue JavaScript and React.js as my main goal to become good at to land a job. And everything that I did revolved around React.js. So I learned things that were specific to React to get me to a point where I'm actually able to build projects. And it was only then that I made enough progress to be able to get the job because I actually knew what I was doing in that single technology. Now, with that being said, if you're looking what to learn, learning Python, nothing wrong with that. Learning C#, nothing wrong with that. Using Node.js as your backend language, nothing wrong with that. Doing PHP development, there's nothing wrong with that. And you know what? There's a lot of jobs available in any one of those paths. But the goal for you is choose a stack and just concentrate on that. And when I say stack, it includes a front-end language, it includes backend language, it includes a database that you use and how those things work together. So I'll give you an example. A very common stack is the MERN stack, which uses MongoDB, Node Express, and React for the front end. There's also PHP-based stacks where you use PHP as the backend, SQL as the database, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for the front end, and it's all hosted on Linux. So there are many definitions for a stack, but the idea is whatever you decide, you have to stick with it. For instance, some people like using Python and Django as their backend, and for the front end, they might use React or Angular or whatever. But whatever you guys decide to do, you have to stick with it and not switch. So one of the things that held me back in making progress is because I constantly switched between one thing to another. You have to learn one thing right, regardless if it's Python related, if it's C# and ASP.NET related, or it's JavaScript based, like using React and Node.js related. So to bring everything together, this idea of a shiny thing syndrome is a real thing. And even now to this day, I want to learn everything, but realistically I have to say no and manage what I'm learning. So right now, my goal is to still continue to learn React and JavaScript. The only thing that changed in my life is the job that I got where our backend is written in C#. So because of the fact that this is a requirement for my job, I started learning C#. If I wasn't working at the company, I would just continue learning and improving my React skills and building apps with React, because that's what I initially started. Now I have a friend who asked me if I was available for an opportunity, and their backend is made with Python and Django, which I know nothing about, but they also need an experienced React developer. So if I got a job there as a React developer, and because their API is with Django and Python, I would learn Python and Django because it is part of my job description. But that's because that's something that is required and something I would be getting paid for. But outside, if I didn't have that job or I didn't have this job, I would be constantly learning React and JavaScript, improving my skills to get better and be the best that I can be at the one thing that I'm doing. And the biggest mistake is if you're jumping around from technology to technology, you're just going to learn a little about a lot. And that's a very bad place to be. So if you're watching this video and you're still not sure and you're starting out, it's okay to try things out, but don't spend too much time on meandering your way of what to learn. Pick what's in demand, something you enjoy, and stick with it until you get a job. Don't try it haphazardly and then, oh, I can't get a job with this, and switch to something else. The reason you can't get a job with it is because that one thing you were trying, you didn't do it long enough. So if you take away something from this video, pick one thing and stick with it. Do not add anything new to it until you get your first initial job. I know sometimes it's disheartening when you're learning something and you don't seem to feel that you understand it, but I promise you, you just have to keep going and going and going until you do get it. And once you get it and you get your first job, then you could add technologies to it. I didn't start learning C# before I got a job. I started learning C#, a whole additional language, after I had a job. So the most important thing is pick one thing, set rules for yourself that you're going to stay within these technologies, and just keep learning them, keep building your portfolios, keep building your projects until you get that job. So I hope you found this video valuable. I just wanted to share that with you guys because I know jumping from technology to technology is something that really slowed down my progress, and I feel I could have had a job, 5 years earlier than when I actually did. So if again you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to this channel. If you hate it for some reason, that's okay too. Just let me know in the comments what I could do better, because I do want to get better at this whole YouTube things. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.